Good morning, boys. Today is now January 6th, and we are still reading through our Bibles here. Now we've come to a section in the Sermon on the Mount that I really like. I'm a really big fan of the Sermon on the Mount, and partly because I like to teach the Old Testament so much. And oftentimes people will say, well, the Old Testament is all about law, and the New Testament is all about grace. But what Jesus is showing here in this section, you have heard that it was said, but I say to you, he says over and over again in this section. He's quoting from the Old Testament, alluding to the Old Testament, at least in understanding the Old Testament. And where it's true that it did say you shall not commit adultery in the Old Testament, Jesus is going even deeper than that and talking about the lust that comes out of the heart. Or it says you shall not murder in the Old Testament, which is certainly what the Old Testament said. Jesus says even anger in your heart against your brother is um, transgressing the law in God's eyes. It's God is after the heart obedience, not after what you do on the outside. Of course, what if you have the right heart, you will do what is right on the outside too. And so, I think that Jesus is not doing away with the Old Testament here. He's really showing, and actually, he's not even saying, well, the Old Testament had a simple understanding and now we have a more complex understanding. What he's really showing is that all along God has been after the heart that is behind the activity, right? It's not just what you do, it's why you do what you do and why you don't do other things. Eventually, Jesus will say here at the end of this chapter, therefore must be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And so, obviously, we know that's not possible in our own power by our own means, but God has to change our heart and motivate us from the inside out to do that. So, what I wanted to just share with you guys this morning is that God is after intrinsic motivation. He's after a heart that turns to Him, looks to Him for obedience, and does it out of a sense of gratitude for what He has done for us. That because He has rescued us from that kingdom of darkness and transferred us into the kingdom of His beloved Son, we should react with heartfelt obedience to Him, that we should want to do what is right. Now, I know that's very difficult in our lives. We don't often measure up to that standard. And it's a good thing that Jesus came and rescued us, made it so that even when we fall short of that standard, God can still have us be acceptable in His eyes, declare us righteous in His eyes. So I'm not saying, hey, you guys be perfect or it's over. I'm just saying, hey, listen to God, follow Him with your heart, do what is right on the outside, be obedient to Him, and that heart will be one that God honors and approves for Himself. It's not about your external works, as you know. It's about not being able to do those things, Jesus being righteous on our behalf. And our reaction to God is gratitude and obedience out of that gratitude. I also had that little story about Abram and Lot here. I think it's interesting, just as a side light here, that even though Abram and Lot went their separate ways, Abram kind of chose what was better, and Lot chose what was lesser. Still, Abram, when he hears that Lot is in trouble, he goes and rescues him. So I think that's also godlike character, right? It doesn't matter what somebody has done to mess up in their life. If we have the opportunity to go and rescue them, we should do what we can for that purpose too. So I think it's interesting the story comes back to Abram, and he is going to rescue Lot when he's gotten into a big mess there. So, all right, that's it for today. We'll see you again tomorrow, Lord willing. Bye now.